a name you may not know, built a monument everyone knows. Over 4,500 years later, it remains the most massive structure ever created by human hands. But who was Khufu? It takes so many years to find out. Let's go deeply in that story. I'm an Egyptologist and host of this channel, and I'm so glad you've joined me for the first episode of a brand new series, Solving the Secrets of Khufu's Great Pyramid. We are going to take a deep dive into the life and times of one of the most famous, yet least known, pharaohs in history. The sources are surprisingly scant, but we can piece together a pretty good picture of who he was and how he came to rule. Let's start with his birth. We know that happened sometime in the late 27th century BCE. We don't know the exact year because the records are so fragmentary. The Egyptian year zero, which I use here, puts him at 2680 BC, but some scholars argue for as late as 2640. We also know that his father was almost certainly Sneferu, the second king of the Fourth Dynasty. Most lists give the name of his mother as Hetephire's Eye, but with royal polygamy being what it was, there would have been many women in the royal household bearing children to the king, so Khufu would have had quite a few half-siblings. In fact, if you follow the succession of the Fourth Dynasty through its male line, there are no less than 11 known individuals who could make a claim to the throne in any given generation. Now, normally the eldest son of the pharaoh would be first in line, but there was nothing set in stone about the rules of succession in these early centuries. It seems that oftentimes the king chose his favorite, or perhaps the one best suited to rule. Either way, when Sneferu died, Khufu was able to rise to the throne after him in the early 26th BC, ushering in what is traditionally considered the golden age of ancient Egypt, the age of the pyramids. This period, spanning the reigns of pharaohs Unas through Menkaure, is called by historians the Old Kingdom. During this time, the seat of power was firmly centralized, and the administration was bigger and more active than ever before. The capital was located at Memphis, which the Egyptians called Mennefer, meaning beloved city, where the king's officials collected taxes in the form of grain and produce from the flooded plains of the Nile, and used it to fund large building projects and other expenses of the state. Our boy Khufu is traditionally credited with 25 to 30 years on the throne, although some modern scholars debate these numbers. The date most commonly cited for the start of his reign is 2590 BCE, which would put his death around 2565. But whether he reigned for 25 or 30 years is not going to change much about our understanding of what he accomplished during his rule. In fact, the length of his reign might tell us something about his character. Perhaps he was like other long-reigning monarchs and got progressively more senile as he aged, if indeed that's what happened to him. Or maybe he simply benefited from a long and stable reign, during which the kingdom enjoyed peace and prosperity. Regardless, what we know of Khufu's expansionist policies come from various archaeological sites. There are mining settlements and forts that date back to his reign found all across the Sinai, indicating that he was keen on extracting resources from the region. We also know from historical records that he sent expeditions as far away as Wadi to mine copper and turquoise to decorate his monuments and those of his elite subjects. It's interesting that one of the most famous artifacts associated with the great pharaoh is such a small and unassuming thing. This little ivory statuette of Khufu is just over 6 inches tall. It was discovered in the royal cachette of treasures buried beneath the floor of the Red Chapel at Giza in 1954. It's currently housed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, but where it fits into the chronology of Khufu's reign is up for debate. Some scholars think it comes from his own burial, which would mean it dates to the 26th century BCE, while others believe it could be a copy made in the New Kingdom and buried with the royal mummies in the 12th century BCE. Only further scientific analysis will reveal which camp is correct. On the other hand, his most impressive achievements were along the coast of the Red Sea. Here at Wadi al-Jarf, Khufu built the earliest known harbour in Egypt. Anchors and other ship fittings found here indicate that it was a busy hub for seaborne logistics, likely exporting the products mined and quarried throughout the Sinai. But let's be clear, there was no massive navy to speak of in the 26th century BCE. These boats were more like big rafts. They were flat-bottom and had square sails. To quote a passage from the ancient Egyptian papyrus, they were like geese alighting on the water. Speaking of trade, I should mention here that Khufu was not working in a vacuum. While he ruled the most powerful nation in the region, he was still reliant on getting certain materials imported from abroad. The forests of Byblos in particular provided the bulk of the timber needed for the royal building projects. But, in exchange for cedar planks, the Egyptians had to send cedar seeds back to Byblos, so that the city could keep their own building projects going. Other goods, such as gold, incense, and exotic woods, came in from the Levant and the Arabian Peninsula via seaborne trade. And all of these things would have been useful for the royal works. But they would also have supplemented the homes of Egypt's elite. As for his family, we know that Khufu had a chief wife named Meritites. She is known to us from a trio of beautiful mastaba reliefs depicting scenes from her funeral and the journey of her soul into the afterlife. Other consorts mentioned by name include Queen Itet and junior wife Henat. Their children included sons Kawab, Jedafah, and Kafir, as well as daughters Nefertibet and Hetepheres too. Yes, he really did name two of his children after his parents. That must have been very confusing. As for what we can read about Khufu himself, the Westcar Papyrus offers us two tales of Khufu and the magicians. In the first story, the pharaoh dreams that he will die in 40 days and then goes to the trouble of burying himself alive in order to cheat death. Instead, he gets trapped underground and has to wait 40 days until his magicians come to rescue him. Talk about a downer ending. In the second tale, Khufu has a fabulous boat built so that he can go sailing around the end of the world. I'm sure that went about as well as you'd expect. If you want to learn more about both of these stories, you can check out my episode on them right here. So there we have it. Now you know everything I know about Khufu. Probably more than you ever thought you'd need to know about Khufu. As for the next episodes in this series, we'll be taking a closer look at the evidence left behind by Khufu's architects and construction workers. How did they cut down trees in the forest of Byblos? How did they bring the stone blocks to the Giza plateau? And what does it all tell us about the man who commissioned these projects? All that and more coming soon. Be sure to stay tuned. And thanks so much for joining me. Last time we talked about the Great Pyramid of Giza. We covered some basics and modern cautionary tales. Now it's time to solve some more secrets. Like all good yarns, this one starts with a long ago prelude. Pharaoh Djoser's step pyramid at Saqqara is like an anthill compared to Khufu's later giant. But it established the motifs that would be refined at Giza. Over the next 2 centuries, Sneferu's Midam, bent and red pyramids experimented with the true pyramid form, honing the skills and knowledge needed for what was to come. So let's fast forward to Khufu's leap, the biggest leap in pyramid building yet. His pyramid's base was about 230 meters aside, and its height was about 146.6 meters originally. That's a lot of real estate and mass. We know it used about 2.3 million blocks, each weighing several tons. The Egyptians cut these massive stones with copper tools and hauled them up from the nearby quarries to Giza, where they were lifted into place on the pyramid's interior and exterior faces. Importantly, though, granite from 800 kilometers upriver in Aswan was used for the king's critical inner chambers. Most of the rest of the core stone came from the Giza plateau, including the famous Tura limestone blocks. These are harder and finer grained than the common limestone, so they may have been saved for the job's most visible parts. It wasn't built by slave gangs, contrary to sensationalist modern claims, but by organized, fed and housed work crews. In fact, an entire workers' village has been found just south of the Giza pyramids. Experiments with Old Kingdom tools show that quarry rates of 20 to 30 limestone blocks per team per day were quite feasible. This was aided by water, which was channeled into the cutting grooves to help the copper tools along. Cutting the blocks is only half the challenge, though. The other half is getting those blocks from the quarry to the pyramid. Enter our game changer, Foreman Mirror's diary. It's actually a set of papyri, describing hauling Tura limestone by boat downriver from a quarry near Cairo to Khufu, likely a harbor at the Giza pyramids. This haul was over 800 meters, and likely took weeks due to the work crews need to alternate between rowing and hauling. Other documents record similar hauls from other locations. The ancient Egyptians had an ace in the hole when moving heavy stuff. A waterway, a now dry branch of the Nile, once ran within a few hundred meters of the Giza plateau, ending in a harbor at its base. This would have been crucial for bringing building materials, tools, and yes, even people up from the river without having to drag them across the desert. The presence of the river also suggests why the north face of the pyramid has an entrance so high up, 26 meters above the ground, because the waterfront was higher then. The manner in which the blocks were raised is still a big debate. Linear or zigzag ramps, internal ramps, levers, no one can agree. But Greek historian Herodotus reported that Khufu's pyramid was built in the winter months and that labor was seasonal, with workers coming in shifts from other parts of Egypt. He also described how the Egyptians lifted the stones from step to step, using wooden devices, but he was writing almost 2,000 years after the fact, and his account is often contradictory. So, the raising mechanism remains a mystery. Inside the monument, the entrance to the subterranean passages is hard to find. It's high on the north face, almost completely hidden from view. From there, a passage runs to the center of the monument, then turns south to a large, empty chamber. It's called the Queen's Chamber, but it was probably not used for that purpose. And no one is sure what its strange, tiny shafts were for. Some researchers believe they were for ventilation, but others think they were meant to probe the heavens, perhaps to align with certain stars. From the Queen's Chamber, a passageway continues downward to the Subterranean Chamber. It's cut into the bedrock, and was likely the first part of the pyramid to be built. Researchers think the builders planned to bury the pharaoh here, but changed their mind and opted for the grander design ultimately built for Khufu. But wait, there's more. You want to know more about the many more secrets of Khufu's pyramid? Well, then you'll just have to tune in next time for the finale. Don't miss it. The last time we explored the Great Pyramid of Giza, we climbed into the Queen's Chamber and discovered it wasn't so queenly after all. We'll start at the top and work our way down. Solving the Secrets of Khufu's Great Pyramid, Part 3. Way up here in the Grand Gallery, looking down into the abyss, you can see that this passage is up to the King's Chamber. But what's mind-boggling is the roof. Imagine these gigantic granite beams, some weighing 25 tons, others as much as 80 tons. They were quarried, hauled and lifted without modern machinery, and they form a high arch over your head. It's a spectacular feat of engineering. But also notice how there's no king in this chamber. That's because this place was robbed long ago. Only a broken granite sarcophagus remains of the great king whose name it bears. We'll see him soon enough. But first, let's imagine what this place looked like in the age of Khufu. Polished Tura limestone casing the entire structure. A bright white stone pyramidion on top. This would have sparkled in the desert sun. The beams above us are granite, so they wouldn't weather the same way. So we can imagine that the whole thing looked something like this. How about that for a first impression? In later centuries, the casing was stripped off by quakes, notably one in 1303 CE, some blocks found reused nearby, but most were lost to the desert sands. Also, in the 9th century CE, Ullman tunnel bored through the north face. He thought he might find a secret entrance into the pyramid, but he only got as far as this gallery. The tunnel is now filled in, but we can see where he broke through the outer casing and scraped against the granite beams inside. Descending from the Grand Gallery, we come to the Queen's Chamber again. Then below that, the Relief Gallery, with its mysterious reliefs. You may recall that in Part 2, we explored some of them in detail and uncovered a possible connection to the afterlife. But now we'll keep going down to the floor of the lowest level, where we can see the beginning of the passages leading to the satellite chambers. Going right would take us to the enigmatic Subterranean Chamber, where archaeologists found the black granite sarcophagus that may have held the body of Khufu himself. We'll leave that for another day. Turning left instead, we enter the area known as the Hall of Mirrors. Here we can see the true scale of the lowest level, lined with hundreds of granite pillars. The symmetry is fascinating, but so far we haven't found any mirrors. In fact, the name comes from the reflection of light off the wet walls during construction. Workers would have used buckets of water to keep the limestone blocks slick and easy to move. Next, we'll visit the famous air shafts. These are the only openings to the outside world at the base of the pyramid. Their purpose is unknown, but many believe they were ventilation shafts for Khufu's final resting place. However, recent research suggests they may have served a different function. We've reached the bottom floor now, and we're still not done. We can explore the passages leading to the outside, which were likely used for construction. Or we can go back the way we came. No, let's try something else. Let's turn around and go up to the top of the pyramid. We can do that because, unlike the other three sides, the north face has no casing stones. We can just walk up the bare pyramid. This will bring back memories. It's here at the top that we can get the best view of the other pyramids at Giza. Khufu's pyramid is slightly smaller than Khufu's, but his sphinx looks on in stony silence. Next to that, Menkaur's third pyramid beckons with its gentle slopes. Around the base, you can see the smaller pyramids and mastabas of queens and nobles. From this vantage point, the vast necropolis built for Khufu seems almost believable. But it took a lot longer than 20 years. Right? Well, yes. And yet, some of the interiors suggest that Khufu's successors continued to work on his pyramid as he grew older, adding more chambers and corridors until his death. Speaking of which, scientists in 2023 used thermography and endoscopy to reveal a new 9 meters corridor inside the pyramid. It turns out that Khufu's mountain holds even more secrets. For all that, the big idea behind this whole complex was pretty simple. Divine kingship plus a meritocratic bureaucracy plus Nile River logistics made it possible to raise a tomb the size of a city. The logistics alone are mind-blowing. As for Khufu himself, we know less about the man than the mountain he raised. And that's why Giza still stands, inspiring awe and wonder across the ages. Thanks for coming on this journey with us.